Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. One question I get asked all the time is how do you get to speaking? Can you talk about your experience in getting from the sort of passive knowledge of the language to where you're speaking? Those of you who have been following my channel here at YouTube or who have read my blog, The Linguist on Language, will know that I am a great believer in the value of input-based learning, listening and reading. It's just so powerful, so inexpensive. It's a great way to spend your time in building up your language competence and building up your vocabulary, building up your ability to understand the language, making the brain more familiar with the language. But still, we all want to speak the language. That's why we learn the language. We want to speak. And a lot of people have trouble speaking, or they think they have trouble speaking. And so the question is, how do you get to speaking? Well, the simple answer is, to speak well, you have to speak a lot. Okay? And when you start speaking, at whatever level you start speaking, you're going to have difficulty. In my view, if I put most of my emphasis on listening and reading and accumulating vocabulary, that's going to move me along in my speaking more quickly than just relying on speaking. I need words. If I want to speak to people, I want it to be a natural conversation. I want to understand what they have to say. I've been studying Czech now for 2.5 months. I haven't spoken to anyone in Czech. I don't say anything. If I were in the Czech Republic, I probably would speak to some people. But it would be very difficult. It wouldn't be a very satisfying experience because probably many people in the Czech Republic speak English better than I speak Czech. And those that don't, who only speak Czech, they would come at me so fast in Czech, I wouldn't understand what they're saying. So while I would do it, because I'm there and I'd want to take advantage of the opportunity, and my victories would be few and far between, most of these forays into speaking with the locals would end in defeat. I'd still do it because it's good for you. But I see no need to do it. I'm here in Canada. I would rather wait until I have built up my capability in the language, my comprehension skills, listening comprehension, vocabulary, and then go in, say, 6 months from now. And then I will have a chance to have meaningful conversations with people. But it doesn't matter. Some people don't have the choice. They have to start now. And even if you have spent a year listening and reading, when you first start to speak, it's difficult. It's difficult to summon up all these words that you've been learning and phrases and start using them. But at some point, you have to break the ice. And so it's very important when you do start speaking that you don't get discouraged. In everything we do, if we're playing a game of tennis, let's say, and we play well, or golf, or anything, and we do well, we're encouraged to do it again. If we don't do well, we kind of don't feel very good about ourselves, and we don't want to go back to that experience because it was a not so satisfactory experience. But then with that attitude, you'll never improve. So if I have a poor game of tennis, I feel a little bit badly, but at some level, I've got to say, I've got to go and work harder to get better. The same with languages. But what's more with languages, in tennis, if you do poorly, your opponent defeated you maybe. Whereas in languages, you can take the position that you always win. Because every time you're using a foreign language, however limited a way, you're actually using a skill that you have invested in and that you have developed that you didn't have before. Like if I speak in Czech and I don't understand what the person is saying and I can't say what I want to say, and I know I'll forget the most obvious things like how to say my name is and how are you, but still the little bit that I did get across or did understand, it's an achievement. That's what I've achieved over the last 2.5 months. Plus I know that I understand a lot when I'm doing my listening and reading. So I tend not to feel badly about myself, not to say I'm no good or whatever. I just keep going at it because I know that if you continue to speak, you will improve. Part of the reason you will improve if you continue to speak is because you are hearing, you are again listening, which is so powerful. You're listening to what the native speaker says, and you are noticing how the native speaker says things that you were trying to say. And you will also notice your own mistakes, and that will make you more attentive to those mistakes in your own listening and reading. So actually, speaking is a great way to sort of leverage up your listening and reading activities. But make no mistake, you're going to go through a painful period where some people will have no patience to talk to you in the language that you've been learning. Some will revert to English, some will get unpleasant, and some will be very nice and patient and humor you for a while. But it's going to be a bit of a tough road. The longer you spend listening and reading and building up your vocabulary, the easier the transition is going to be to speaking. But sometimes you don't have the choice. You've arrived in a country, you got to start speaking. So all I'm saying is there's no easy path. The way you improve your speaking is to speak more. Now, there are some other things that can help. Obviously, listening and reading, continued listening and reading, intensive listening and reading. When I lived in Japan, I started speaking soon after I arrived there to the extent that I could, but the vast majority of my learning time was still spent listening and reading, building up my comprehension skills and my vocabulary. Now, the other thing you can do is the words you're going to use. The active vocabulary is obviously a limited set of your total passive vocabulary. You don't have to use all your words. You don't have to use all your phrases. Find some handy words and phrases that you like to build your thoughts around. You don't have to know all the ways of saying evidently, obviously, clearly, these synonyms which we tend to use in conversation. Have one that you use, obviously, or in my opinion, it's my view, just in my opinion, pick one that works for you. So have a number of these set phrases that you can use. Pronunciation, some people worry about pronunciation. I think having good phrasing is more important than pronunciation. But if you want to work on your pronunciation, I've found that if you can find some audio content that you really like, where you like the voice, you like the content, you like the intonation, then it becomes almost like music. And I did this with Chinese, and I listened over and over and over again to a very limited range of content, and I believe that that really improved my tones in Chinese. So you can do that kind of thing. There are people, writing is very good, because when you write you have more time to think, so it gives you time to work out how to say things. Personally, I don't mind using Google Translate. There are a number of things that I would like to say in Czech. I don't know how to say them. I just type them in English. Up comes Google Translate. It's 80% right, but it's good enough. It gives me a sense of how I would express these things in the language, and sometimes I'll even save them into link and save those words and phrases for later use. There is this technique of shadowing, which I don't do, but where people listen and repeat what they're listening to. I just find it very difficult to continue doing that. I've done it on occasion, but the whole thing with language learning boils down to where do you want to spend your time. If you have an unlimited amount of time, you can shadow, read, write, listen, speak, do everything. But if you have an hour or two a day, you have to make a decision. And I find that I'm more motivated to increase my vocabulary and increase my comprehension skills and do more reading rather than to walk around, shadowing or talking out loud. I tend not to do that. It's possible that speeds up the transition to speaking. I don't know, because I don't do it. I find that my approach of focusing on building up my vocabulary is good enough. And then when I get the opportunity to speak, I just go for it and stumble and make mistakes and get beaten up and go right back at it again. And it just gradually, surprisingly, you just start to improve. A big part of speaking well is to notice how your language differs from that of the native speaker. So when you're talking to someone, you got to really listen clearly to what they're saying, how they use words. A lot of people don't listen to the pronunciation of the native language. They try and read it as if it were English. So if there's an A there, it's pronounced A. No, most languages, A is pronounced Ah. So you really have to pay attention and then start using it, try things out, and not worry about it. I think a big part of one other thing too is when you speak, let go. Don't say I'm this foreigner, meek, mild, stumbling, sounding foolish foreigner. I'm here, I'm speaking, I'm communicating. If I can communicate, fine. If I can't, I'll do better next time. Like, it's not such a big deal. Now, all of that is easier said than done, but someone asked me, what do I do? That's what I do. At some point, I start speaking and I don't worry about it. But even when I am increasing my speaking activity, I still put most emphasis on listening and reading. So, there you have it. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate.